Hello, Serious Survivor here. Today we're going to discuss defensive measures and protocol that can be taken to assist in keeping your primary location or bug out locations safe and secure. This is the first video in the SHTF Defense and Tactical Series. This series begins with the focus on perimeter defense and alarms. Each video in this series will discuss different aspects of defense from the perimeter to close quarter combat, along with the basic fighting skills necessary. This is a broad subject, and you may find modifications that are necessary to be made depending on different aspects such as geographic location, terrain, whether you're in an urban area or wilderness type of setting, or something in between. Needs will also vary depending on manpower. And for the purpose of this video, we'll be discussing tactics that apply to a larger group, a group that can afford to have probably 4 or more people on watch at all times. We're going to look at smaller group tactics in the next video in this series, but in this series we're going to focus on a group that can have at least 4 people on watch at all times. Because after SHTF, after some time goes by, groups will most likely start to grow larger, and that will afford them more people on watch, but also more people to protect. One thing that's extremely difficult to take into account for, and that is the human factor. How will certain people react when the shooting begins? How seriously will people take their watch duties? Will someone perform their duties well? Always evaluate the personnel and try to determine the ones that would be best suited for each task, such as standing watch properly. A watch has to be taken extremely seriously. And roving patrols. Use situational awareness to help in surveying or patrolling the area. Because when performing roving patrols or manning a forward observation post puts a survivor closer to the potential enemy than anyone else in the group. This is the first line of defense and detection. First, training before the event is key. Be extremely careful with firearms training after an event has occurred, although I know this will be necessary, but the amount of noise that will make will very likely draw unwanted attention to your location. This could bring your enemies closer. Hand-to-hand combat training is an aspect that should be developed before the event, but this is an aspect that can also be taught to survivors from day one. Also, make sure to ensure that all members of your group are extremely intimately familiar with every aspect of the terrain and environmental features around your primary location, especially if traps are being used. In an urban area, this will require exploration of surrounding buildings and structures. It will also require the team to make sure the surrounding structures are impassable and can't be used by the enemy for cover and concealment. Remember, anything our team could use for a tactical advantage, so can the enemy. So make sure to eliminate any areas outside or close to the perimeter that may pose a threat to the group. This can mean securing, boarding up, or even destroying unmanned structures that are not of need or advantage to you or the group, and to eliminate any point of access by the enemy. Understanding these features will ensure that all members know exactly where each point of cover and concealment are located, and will give you a tactical advantage over someone who isn't familiar with every nook and cranny of your area. And every advantage we can secure for ourselves is a disadvantage for the enemy. Roadways can result in multiple points of entry and exit. If your area has multiple roadways, then this can present a problem, as the enemy and various people in general are likely to travel the roads more frequently than trekking through the woods. If possible, employ roadblocks to completely block off all of the roadways, with the exception of the ones the group is capable of defending, because we will need 1 to 2 points of entry and exit. Too many of these points is very dangerous and leaves us wide open for infiltration and attack. Make sure the roadblocks cannot be easily rammed through with a vehicle. trees, very large rocks, non-working vehicles, etc. Anything that people can move onto the road that will prevent entry with vehicles through that point, but things that can also be moved by the group if an emergency evac or egress was necessary. Also be aware that anything placed as a roadblock can also be used as cover and concealment by us and the enemy. But we don't want to close off all roads. We definitely need at least one point of entry and exit for our own group. And these points will have to have a roadblock of sorts that would allow for passage for the group members. And when it comes to establishing a roadblock or a checkpoint, some things that will really help is if you use vehicles to pull across the road, then always put the engine side of the vehicles towards each other. It's much easier for someone with a vehicle to ram through a roadblock, to ram through the trunk side of a vehicle because there's much less weight in that area. So parking the vehicles with the engine compartments across the road facing one another will make it just a little more difficult. And here we see some examples of how vehicles could be positioned for a roadblock. Now there are obviously almost an infinite number of possibilities that we could position vehicles here, and these are just a few. Guards at any roadblock must always be armed, also accompanied by at least one high-powered rifle in an overwatch or sniper position. The roadblock positions can also be far enough out to double as forward observation posts. Also, bridges and train tracks have to be taken into account. These can provide easy access from the outside. Also, the entrance and exit points can be used to create choke points or funnels to keep an enemy close together if they do breach and enter through these points. And all members of the group should always enter and exit the camp through one of these roadways, never through alternate methods such as the woods because they may be mistaken as enemy. Next, finding and securing the perimeter. This assumes that your primary location has been decided upon and the members of your groups are already present at the area. Take a look at the structures in your location and determine what you would like to call the center point of your area. From this center point, measure approximately 1,000 yards out. Now I know this distance may not be a possibility depending on the area you're in. If not, then adjust the distances accordingly. The 1,000 yard radius around your location is your perimeter. This is your first line of defense. This area is the location and distance that if you have to engage the enemy, we need to keep the fight here. Because we don't want to firefight too close to our primary shelters. This would endanger the others in the location and also makes the area vulnerable to fire attacks and similar, which could result in the burning and destruction of our gear and supplies, and, most importantly, the people. Another reason for this distance is because if your perimeter is being attacked, then 1,000 yards is further than the range of the majority of rifles on the market. Although there are many that will shoot that far and over, it's much more likely to encounter enemy forces who are using more common weapons such as the AR and AK platforms. Once we've established our perimeter distance, we then need to place markers at 100-yard intervals. This gives us an advantage in knowing the exact distance to our enemy combatants if they breach the perimeter. Knowing the exact or a close approximate of the distance enables us to develop secondary plans for if our perimeter is breached and gives the advantage when communicating distances and gaining more accurate firing solutions and shots. This aspect will be discussed in a later video. Once the perimeter has been established and the intervals have been marked, we need to establish 4 observation posts, or OPs. For smaller groups, you can use 2 OP, which would only require a smaller amount of people. Establish 1 observation post in each compass direction, 1 to the north, 1 to the south, 1 to the east, and 1 to the west. Of course, these don't have to be exactly true north or true east, etc., but use the directions as reference and try to establish these positions an equal distance apart. These are positions in which survivors can use the benefit of concealment and even cover to basically observe. Always try to assign 2 personnel to each position. This is the position or positions in which survivors on watch will have a tactical advantage. When selecting an observation post, survivors should avoid obvious and conspicuous locations such as hilltops, water towers, or other isolated terrain features, and ensure that the observation post can be reached via a concealed route. Always make sure the approach route is from the rear. This will not leave a visible or a noticeable trail for an enemy to follow on the forward side. Observation posts should be manned with at least 2 personnel. If there are 2 personnel in the OP, it's important that the observer position itself rotates out every 20 to 30 minutes between these 2 individuals, because efficiency tends to decrease after such a time. They should also be provided with a means of communication with the group. Be aware, though, that the average walkie-talkies and such can easily be monitored, so for larger groups, having a runner is also an option. The gear needed for these posts or OPs: signal flares, in case all-out attacks. You don't want to use these flares for everything because they give away your position, but if there's an all-out attack, then you can signal in exactly which direction it's coming from. Firearms, preferably one survivor with a standard self-defense rifle such as AR or AK, and one with a long-range bolt action. A first aid kit, ammunition, communications, water, and possibly some food in case they are trapped there, a map and compass so the survivors can relay actual positions of the enemy. Next is booby traps. Booby traps can be broken down into 3 categories: the type that alerts the survivors, such as a very loud noise or bright light. The second type is designed to capture or specifically injure a person or personnel. The third type is the deadly type. Trap placement is crucial because the last thing we need is to injure our own people. That's why all members of the group, all of them, have to be made aware of exactly where each and every trap is located. A good idea for the placement of these traps are between the individual forward operating posts, but also ahead of them or outside of the perimeter. This will help alert the OPs that someone or an enemy is approaching and should keep the traps outside of our standard patrol areas. Traps may also be employed within the perimeter, but be extremely careful with this. I would recommend outside of the perimeter instead. I'll detail the types of booby traps in another video in this series, but trap construction and design is a very big subject. Next, to ensure that the majority of the area between the observation post is being monitored, the use of roving patrols or walking sentries can make this task a reality. Ideally, we would like to have 4 roving patrols. Each would patrol an area between 2 of the observation posts. Each roving patrol would be assigned to an observation post or basically report to this observation post every set time, such as 30 minutes to an hour. This ensures that with regular check-ins, then we would be alerted quickly if something was wrong. Patrolling an area is not as simple as it seems, because when the survivor patrolling is in motion, then he is susceptible to enemy ambush. This is why the roving patrol must be adequately trained and briefed on the duties of this position. The roving patrol watches should be rotated out every 2 to 4 hours. The rover's responsibilities would be basically patrolling the area between the 2 OPs that he is assigned to monitor. A good patrol would understand camouflage and the use of cover and concealment to their advantage. Also, an alert patrol will modify his patrol, not taking the same route or path every time, although we do not want to vary from the location too much. Timing is essential. The patrol should also alter the times, but do not alter them too much, as there would also be a necessity to maintain a certain time frame. Because the roving patrol should check in at the observation post they are assigned to at least every 30 minutes to an hour, if they are more than 5 minutes late, then there should be concern and a scout sent out to determine the problem. There's one more aspect that's crucial. This is the sniper, or commonly called the overwatch. There is a definite need for at least one sniper covering your area. This is a large subject though, and all aspects will be detailed soon in a future video. And one more requirement of those on patrol or watch, they must understand the difference between sniper fire, probing shots, and all-out attacks. Also decoy attacks. These are big subjects and this video is already getting a little long, but these are covered in detail in the upcoming sniper video. With a perimeter set with various traps, a solid plan for the forward observation post, all roads, trails, and passageways restricted, at least one sniper or overwatch in place, and roving patrols patrolling the area in between the OPs, then the remaining survivors should be able to sleep a little better at night. That's about it for this part of the series. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it was informative. Thanks a lot for watching, and for now, Serious Survivor, out.